And then after they tell you why you need it, and they tell you, why it's beneficial to you, then they tell you what you need to do to get it, right? So tonight we're going to be talking about how to forgive. We're going to be going over the steps of how this happens. And then, like I said, this is going to be the end of the forgiveness portion. Is we're going to go over how to do it, and that'll be it. So, and we're going to talk about just a few steps on how to forgive and how to kind of get past it, right? So the steps that we're going to be talking about, one is assess the damage and admit that you've been hurt. Assess the damage and admit that you've been hurt. Then we're going to talk about addressing the trauma or the offense. After that, we'll talk about after that, you set boundaries and you stick to those boundaries. And then you move on, acknowledging that there's still work to be done. All right. So we're going to start again with assess the damage and admit that you've been hurt. So forgiving in so many ways, to me, it's kind of like recovering from an addiction, where the first thing that you got to do is acknowledge that there is a problem. In the AA meetings and that kind of thing, the first thing that they tell them to do is acknowledge the fact that you have an issue. So with forgiving, the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge that we've been hurt. We got to acknowledge that there has been trauma. So like I said, with forgiveness, it's the same thing. And we'll never truly get to a point to forgive if we don't acknowledge that the thing happened and that it affected us. And a lot of us, including myself at times, right? We put on a false persona that nothing affects us. It's like we're trying to convince ourselves that we are exempt from hurt and that nothing phases us. And this causes us to have a false sense of invincibility. And this causes us to be stunted in our growth. So us acting like what was done to us didn't hurt, or acting like what happened didn't traumatize us, it stunts us from growing. And it causes us to avoid things now and have to deal with the effects of it later. But instead, of doing, what we're supposed to do and acknowledging that there's been damage or that there's been trauma, we try to forget, or we try to act like it didn't happen, or again, like I said, act like it didn't affect us. And a lot of us, whether we realize it or not, we suffer from PTSD, that post-traumatic stress syndrome. That's not just a military thing. That is the effect of, it can be the effect of something that somebody's done to you, and it causes you to act a certain way. It causes you to feel a certain way. And what it does as a result, we ended up, because we have this unaware PTSD, we end up lashing out on folks. Don't know, we don't know why we lashing out on folks. We become unproductive in our lives. We become, we're in a place of stagnation. And then we battle issues with trust, or we battle issues with codependency. Questions?
No, you speaking right.
So with that, we often, like I said, we often can't figure out why we feel the way we feel. We can't figure out why we act the way we act. And sometimes we're confused as to why we are the person that we've become. And most times it's because there's something that has hurt or traumatized you, and you have not acknowledged the thing, and ultimately have not dealt with that thing. So as a result, what happens is, um, the trauma never gets dealt with. The trauma never goes away. What happens is that trauma ages with you. You think that you've gotten over it, and you ain't got over it. It just got old, and you got old. Y'all got old together, right? So it travels with you if you don't acknowledge that it's there. We have to acknowledge that we've been hurt, and we have to assess how much that offense actually hurt us. Now, in some cases, the trauma cannot be assessed immediately. Some things we don't realize how bad they hurt us until later. And I'll give you an example. And I don't know how many of y'all have ever shaved. I know it's a lot of women up here. I know y'all shave y'all legs and stuff like that, right? But if you've ever shaved and you've nicked yourself with the razor, right? Sometimes you don't realize that you've nicked yourself, or that that you've cut yourself with that razor, until you go to put alcohol on afterwards, or say you're in the shower when you're shaving, the soap hits that cut. So sometimes we don't realize that there's trauma until something is applied to make us feel that pain again, right? And what we call those things are triggers, right? Being triggered and not realizing that there's trauma can be dangerous. Again, because you don't realize it's there. And somebody might say something, or somebody might do something to you, and it reminds you of something else that's happened to you. But you didn't acknowledge that thing. So you don't realize that what this person has done, what this new person has done, or what this new person has said is only triggering you or upsetting you the way it is because of some underlying thing that you haven't dealt with. So that's one thing where the trauma isn't recognized until there is a trigger, or something that causes the pain to come back, right? In other cases, it's like being cut with a razor blade, where you don't realize the trauma until you see blood. What I mean by that, I'll give you an example. So I was working at Belt, and a lot of y'all know I worked in the shoe department for a little while. And a part of that is we have to cut open boxes. And the box cutter is a razor blade. Anybody that's ever worked with razor blades know razor blades are extremely sharp, right? So I cut my finger with the razor blade, and because of the sharpness of the blade, I didn't realize that I'd even cut myself. So I keep on working. I keep on going. So my manager comes in, and every day he came in, when I was there, he spoke to me and he always shook my hand. That was his thing. And so this particular day, he comes in, he speaks, he shakes my hand, and he points out that I got blood on his hand. So for some of us, we don't realize the trauma until we see the effects that our trauma has on somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful of that, because what happens is, if we don't address that trauma, or if it's there and we don't acknowledge that it's there, then, and I heard it put like this before, we end up bleeding on people that didn't cut us. We end up, the trauma ends up affecting other people that had nothing to do with the traumatic situation in our life. So the first thing that we got to do, if we're really going to try to get past something, if we're really going to try to, live this life of forgiveness, is we got to stop acting like things don't bother us. Stop acting like we're above hurt, or we're invincible to pain. And sometimes you just need to stop and acknowledge that you've been hurt. And in acknowledging that you've been hurt, you need to really sit down and take the assessment of that hurt. Figure out what was the effects of this thing. I'll give you an example. And this just happened to me this past weekend, and I'll share it with y'all. So when I was about 9 or 10, I want to say I was 10 at the time. There was a relative of mine, and they were in a very abusive relationship. We talking physical. And I saw my relative, right, getting physically abused. I'm talking punched in the eye. I'm talking hit with flashlights and stuff like that. You talking real abuse. And in this, I'm not, like I said, I'm 9 or 10. So I'm not thinking that what I'm seeing, what I'd seen was going to affect me anytime later. So fast forward, another relative of mine, she gets married, and the issue was with the first relative that was being abused. Her abuser said stuff like he loved her, right? And even in loving her, he still felt comfortable abusing her. Second relative, gets this person, and the person says the same thing. They express love towards them. But because I'd seen love look abusive before, I associated that same love that the first person said that they had for my relative with what this new person says, the new love that this new person says that they had. And so what it did was it automatically put me on the defense. It automatically put me in a place of anticipation, right? That what I'd seen before was going to happen again. And so what happens is, because I never really acknowledged it or assessed, what had happened, now there's this new person who hasn't done anything wrong, and they haven't, there was no offense, there's no real similarities, but I'm now bleeding on this new person that didn't cause the original trauma. So fast forward to this past weekend, I'm downstairs and I'm cleaning up, and again, this is undealt with, unresolved trauma that I didn't even know was there. And it's strange because this stuff never, it never really came up or affected me in any way until I decided that I'm gonna live a life of forgiveness, and I'm going to, go into each day intentionally wanting to forgive. It never came up until I decided to do this. So here we are, this past weekend. Like I said, I'm cleaning up, and I had a flashback of this situation. And that's when I realized that that first situation traumatized me the way that it did. And then it made me realize that I had blamed or bled on somebody else. My previous trauma damaged a new relationship with somebody else. Does that make sense? Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it hurt me because the new relationship, with this new person, it could have been something really special, right? It could have been something really healing for me had I acknowledged and dealt with the trauma in the beginning. So now here I am, almost 15 years later, dealing with something that I thought I had gotten over, dealing with something that I thought I had gotten past and thought I had forgiven. And now I find myself having to forgive again. In acknowledging and assessing the damage that's been done to you, you got to understand that even if you've acknowledged it before, if that trigger happens, if you're triggered, or if you are reminded of that original pain, you may be put in a situation where you're forced to start over again in the whole forgiveness process. Questions or comments?
I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, this is my question. Okay, just say with my situation that I went through, is it still forgiveness even though when you was talking about the abuse and whatnot? And with my situation is I felt like I forgave, but I don't still want to speak to him.
Okay.
Is that still like you know what I'm saying?
Right. And so, and see, now you done missed the past 3. Now I'm
Don't call me out.
But anyway, so the reason why I said that, because we talked about how just because you've forgiven a person um doesn't mean that you're gonna mend that relationship back with that person. So if you were intentional with the forgiveness that you say that you did, at that time, if you have feelings of, okay, I don't want to deal with that person now, I believe you still forgiven that person, but you're not trying to put yourself back in a toxic or dangerous situation. Does that answer your question?
But let me also add this. Everything that Tommy said, but also add on the fact that from now on, whenever you are around that person, you should not have any malice in your heart, if that makes sense. So it's
Right.
okay. It's okay to not be in the same type of relationship with them because that's not normal, and it's not expected. But you shouldn't have anything in your heart towards them moving forward.
Okay, time out. When you say malice, like, I mean, okay, for example,
I'm
just say if
sorry. Any hatred, you should not be looking at them. I'm sorry. You should not be looking at them like, yeah, she messed me up the last time. I ain't about to hang around her. You can't be like that.
No, my thing is, I understand that part. But my thing is, if you see a person, I mean, if I see that person, for example, if I see him in Food Line, he speak, oh, hey, how you doing? And I'm just looking at him like, don't want to speak. Is that not like, is that like,
Now, I'm gonna say this. Even if somebody has done something to you and to offend you or whatever, you're still responsible for doing what's right.
mm.
Yeah, you're supposed to be okay with being able to just say, hey, how you doing? And keep on moving.
I
I
heard
understand.
there was a guy who was at Campbell, and we were on this FaceTime call or something in one of the dorm halls, and he said something that I've always remembered, and it was dealing, he was talking about forgiving people and moving past stuff. You can, and he said it just like this, and if you ever hear it again, this is where we got it from. It was a dude at Campbell. He said this. He said you can stay cordial with a person and not be connected to that person.
Okay, I felt that, Tommy. I felt that.
Okay. But yeah, you can be cordial with that person, and if you see them, if they speak, it's the right thing to speak back. You ain't got to hold a conversation, and we're gonna get to setting boundaries here in just a minute. But it's okay to speak. But like Jemiah said, you got to make sure that you don't have ill will or wishing bad on that person. All right. So, um, like I said, first thing that we got to do is acknowledge that we've been hurt and assess the damage. We got to take inventory of how it actually affected us. Now, after we do that, go ahead, Sierra.
A question. So, like she was just saying, like, say she see whoever it is at Food Line and he speak like, hey, how you doing? And she doesn't say anything back. Like, are you saying that she hasn't completely forgiven him? Because you said that we can forgive somebody, but the relationship doesn't have to go back to where it was. And I feel like that's still the same thing as a relationship not going back to where it was, because you might have still forgiven him, but you're just not on speaking terms. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing. Like, it's like I feel like you don't have to be cordial. Like, you can forgive and just deal with them. Like, well, you don't even really have to deal with them because you don't really have to talk to them, really. But you can still forgive somebody. Because I feel like it's people that has done things to me in the past and we're just not on speaking terms. I don't want to be on speaking terms. And it's like, I don't hate them. I don't have any type of feelings towards them. I forgave them, but it's just like, we don't have to talk.
Okay. All right. And so with that, right now, if you are in a, if you're in a situation where, somebody's done something and y'all are not on speaking terms. Now, usually when you say something like we're not on speaking terms, that means I'm not going to initiate something towards you. I'm not going to start a conversation with you. But if you see that person and that person speaks to you, it's just a, hey, Sierra, or a, hey, TA. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, and keeping it moving. But like I said, we're going to get into the boundaries here in a little while. And what y'all are talking about is more so, setting boundaries as far as what our relationship is going to look like moving forward.
I got something to say.
Go ahead.
So going back to what was the first thing, two things you said? Acknowledging.
So you're acknowledging that you've been hurt, and you're assessing or examining how much that hurt or that trauma actually affects you.
Okay. So I feel like sometimes it's kind of hard to like fully like sit there and like assess and that you're hurt or how you've been hurt. Because I know for me, I'm the type of person, I don't like to sit in negativity. I don't like my mind to sit in like sadness or any type of pain or hurt like that. So anytime something comes to my way, I'm more so like the person like, I'm not gonna let this get me down. I'm just gonna not even think about it. Like I'm gonna just do something else. Like I'm gonna just push it to the side. And I know that's not really healthy, but sometimes I feel like it's just hard to like sit in those painful emotions and actually kind of like, oh God, I was reading something, and actually like process what's going on versus being like, I'm just gonna get back to a happy mood. I guess it's kind of like if you don't sit there and process it, you're kind of like developing like a coping mechanism in a way, or like a defense mechanism in a way of kind of just like covering your hurt with like certain like reactions or emotions or something like that.
Okay, so
can I speak?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. So my thing is this. Once you try to put out the olive leaf and you felt like you in a good space and you trying to forgive that person and you in a good place and you get along and they turn around and do the same cock and bull spit to you and they ain't changed not one bit, then there's a time and a point you're gonna have to cut somebody off. Don't you think?
Right. Yeah, and we talked about that where, like I said, the relationship that you have with that person is not obligated to go back to how it was before. If you have
I don't even want to speak to this person. I don't want to speak to this person. If I see the person, he need to keep moving. I don't need to speak to him.
Okay, so I got a question. This is for everybody on this particular part. Does speaking to that person reopen the wound for you?
Yes, it does.
Show the heck do. I
Yes,
want to
it
bust
does.
it to
To
the
the
white
point,
meat.
I just want to just,
Okay.
I get a flashback.
Well, for me, it doesn't reopen a wound. I just feel like we don't have anything to talk about. Like, so it's no reason, like, I don't have to say, hey, like, just act like you don't know me. I'm act like I don't know you, but it doesn't reopen a wound. I just feel as if it's no point for me to even be cordial, especially if I don't intend on a relationship returning to the way that it was.
But how it won't?
Wait a minute. I'm gonna just say this part, and I understand what she's saying, but some people is not that strong enough, especially when they went through so much with a person that caused them so much pain with physical abuse, emotional abuse, and then you really, really love this person, and every time you see them, you be like, Dad, how can you do that to me when I done nothing to you, and this is how you treated me? It's like it sometimes just come with a flashback because some people is with me myself. I wasn't that strong enough at the time. I'm strong now because I don't care. But it's like when I see him, it's like it comes back to me like, Dad, this boy did this to me. He did that to me. This nigga choked me and top passed out. You know, stuff like that. It's just like it comes to a flashback. And then you got there to say, hey, but in my heart, I really had to come to the house and say, okay, Lord, I know I'm gonna have to forgive him so I can move on. And it's hard.
But you forget that person that turn around and do the same wrong mess. Like, come on, bro. Come on, son.
But that's
Come
why
on, man.
we should be able. I know it's hard, but grace is something that's given to us, and I know it don't seem realistic, but a lot of times that's all we have to give. And I will say this, for the person that keeps going back and doing the same thing, all you can do is learn from their mistakes and say, you know what, this is who you are. When somebody show you who they are, just believe them as who they are. Keep it cordial and cute, and keep it pushing. Because they're not gonna change until it's time for them to change. And there's nothing that we can do about it. But we can't go to hell over them. Let's put it like that. I will not go to hell because you keep getting on my nerves. No.
Look, why would we be up? Why would we be the one going to hell when the Bible said when your right arm offend you, cut them off?
Tommy, bring it in.
What? That's what the Bible said, didn't it say?
Okay, and so and back to the statement that I made earlier, there's a difference between you and I agree. You know, if like you said, your right hand offend offend you, cut them off. But like I said, there's a difference between being cordial and reconnecting with that person. Being cordial means that we not buddy. We might not be on speaking terms, but when it comes to my interaction with you, I'm still gonna do what's right. Does that make sense?
And I was trying to go back to the original scripture that we started off with a couple weeks ago. End all be all. It's in the Bible. If you don't forgive, God ain't finna forgive you. So we gonna have to figure out a plan to be able to forgive at the end of the day.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand it. But me cutting them off doesn't say I do not forgive them. Me cutting them off saying I'm protecting myself, because if I let you do this again, all you doing is reopening the wound I'm trying to get the good Lord to heal. So for me, in order for me to heal, let me just separate myself from you for a while.
And we're saying that that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. The only thing is, as you're healing, you can't heal without completely saying, you know what? I'm healing, but I got to discard what they did. Like, you got to forgive them in the midst of your healing. That's not saying that you got to continue to talk to them. That's not saying that you got to be on the same term in the same relationship that you were before. That's not what we're saying. If you have to be...
Well, let me ask this question real fast. Wouldn't it be the fact that, what's that saying to say you can't forgive, but I ain't going to forget? Is that still not like forgiving that person? Because I ain't going to forget what you did.
All right. And we talked about that. So that statement is true. And it still holds true, even in what we've been talking about, with forgiveness. You forgive, which we talked about. Forgiveness is not saying that I'm going to immediately get past this, or that our relationship is going to go back to how it was before. But forgiveness is saying that I'm making a vow to put forth my best effort to get past this. Now, if that means cutting a person off, then you cut that person off. But if you see that person and they speak to you, you speaking back is not them regaining access to your life.
Teach it.
I have something to say. So, okay, so I know that forgiveness is a process, right? And healing is can be many different layers. And I feel like each time we get past to a different layer, we're always having to continue to forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive through that process. And each time you come towards that point of which trauma originated from, and you still feel the way you feel within yourself, then you haven't healed completely. And each time you get faced with those thoughts, it's like, I gotta forgive. I forgive him. I forgive him. I forgive him. You have to keep continuing to forgive that person through the healing process. So if he still affects you that way, he still has control over you. You're still not finished healing.
And to add to that, just because you're not finished healing does not mean that you have not forgiven. We talked about this last week. Forgiveness and healing do not happen at the same time. For most of us, me included, you've forgiven, in your heart, you've really put forth, you've really been intentional about getting over, getting past this and forgiving that person. But that hurt is still there.
Yes, like I feel like when you say you forgave him at the first point, you initiated that process to start in forgiveness. And each time you get faced with those emotions or new emotions or trauma that gets reopened, it's another opportunity for you to forgive through your process, your healing process. But you can't stay stagnant in your healing process. I know sometimes it may feel like, well, what they did to me was unfair. How could they do that? It's not fair. And sometimes you decide to sit in that anger from what happened.
Well, can I say this? It really, and honestly, it really, really, really took me a long time to like, okay, I got to let this go. I got to let this go and move on. But my main issue is I don't have nothing against the person. I just know that when I see him, even though you say I understand it's a process of the healing, it's just like it just triggered because of what I just been. It's like what you go through. Sometimes you think back like into yourself, like this is what I done, and I'm like, Lord, what I had to be the one to get hurt like that. Even though I should have listened to what everybody said, he won't no good, but I was doing what I wanted to do by being hard headed. But by the same time, it just feel like I know I forgave. Because when he speak, I speak, but I keep walking. Ain't no conversation. But by the end of the day, it's just that the thing in the back of my head is like, how could he done that to me? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So do you feel like sometimes it feels unfair to let it go?
Yeah, because I felt like I should got an apology. Like you never said to me you were sorry. You never said. And then it's just like when you did trying to apologize, it was like you were trying to come back in and try to make things work. Like, no, nothing is going to work because why? You went right back and done the same thing again. So I don't trust you. You lie bad. We fight like two men in the street. So it's like, what's the point? So I really had to let it go, which I have for a long time, going on 5 years. But it's just that when I see him, it's just that, like, how could you hurt me? After everything I done for you, how could you do that? To the point now, I don't want to be with nobody. I'm gonna be honest, because I guess I'm still in the healing process. I guess I don't know. I just don't want to be with nobody in no relationship because it's what I've been through.
That's trauma. That's
just Tommy, she just brought up a good point that you made last week about how not fully forgiving and going through that healing process afterwards, it tends to make you a slave to what started it, to be honest, because you not getting to the point where you're able to heal from that could be potentially holding you back from your husband that God is trying to give to you. That's crazy to me. But I strongly believe and I pray that can get healed real quick fast.
Yeah.
What y'all trying to send me a husband?
Oh
No.
God.
Okay, all right. Moving forward.
Not at all. Not at all. Anyway, but and I'll tell you this, TA, just real quick. And we talked about this last week too. You're gonna have to learn to forgive and move forward without the apology that you feel like you deserve. Because with a wound, and this is my favorite analogy. I'm gonna stop using y'all, I promise. But anyway, with a wound, right? You cut yourself. The apology is something from the outside. The apology is the band-aid that you put on the cut. All it does is it covers it. But the band-aid is not what heals it. The healing from the, of the wound comes from the inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so that other person is not responsible for contributing to your healing.
I agree. Because some people, like, they haven't even realized like how much they've hurt you or what they've done to you. They haven't even taken accountability. So you can't just sit around and wait for someone to apologize for something when sometimes they might not even know how much it affected you or what they've done to you. So you really have to take accountability yourself and forgive that person, even if you haven't gotten that apology or even if you haven't talked to them or worked through it with them. You have to depend on yourself to forgive, even if the person you can't even speak to the person, or if you're not speaking with the person, you have to do that yourself. Because if not, sometimes some of us might never heal. If you feel like it takes for that person to apologize, then you're never going to heal. Because some people are never going to apologize.
But see, my thing is, it's like it was years ago, whatnot, when we did meet up or whatnot, and then he called himself apologizing then. But then, God would give us, we call that spirit of discernment. Because that's what God gave me that gift of. And I'm saying to myself, okay, no, you going right back. It's like something didn't just feel right. Like I knew you was going back to your old ways again. So I didn't like really accept his apology because I just knew like, no, I don't trust it. And then everything came out like it's supposed. It went right back again. So what was the point of you saying you sorry to me when you didn't really mean it because you're still doing the same thing over again? Right. And that's why I was just like, no, you know what? I'm done. Don't talk to me. Don't say nothing to me. You go your way, I go my way. That's it. Thank you for paying for a divorce. Appreciate it, because I wasn't going to pay for it. But by the end of the day, I went my way. But now when you see me, you smile or you texting me, what you doing? I don't respond back. I don't say nothing because you shouldn't be texting me. It's like, I'm done.
Right. And I'm going to say this just real quick. So we got to be careful. And, this kind of goes back to being cordial and not reconnecting, right? We got to be careful with putting ourselves back in situations that could possibly reopen the wound or make the wound worse. So when he came back with the apology or or whatever, if you knew that him being around reopened that, I'm gonna just be honest, you should have never let him regain access to your life to hurt you again. And we got to be careful of that because, like I said, what that apology did is it covered it. It made it feel better.
But
And because it made it feel better, right? But at the time, you know, he gave you what you thought you wanted.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that for us. They give us what we thought that we needed or we thought that we wanted. We got to be careful. But we got to catch back up because we almost at time, and I want to end this out this week. So after you have assessed the damage and after you have admitted that you've been hurt and you've taken account of how bad that hurt or that trauma actually hurt you, right? This goes into a lot of what we've already been talking about. Now you have to address the trauma or address the offense. Now, from here, I'll say this. In addressing the trauma and addressing the offense and or offender, it's going to take prayer and fasting. Prayer because you need to tell God what your concern is and what it is that you're looking for. And then you need to fast, turn down a plate or turn the social media off, deny yourself of something so that you can open yourself up for God to speak to you. Because at this point, when you're addressing the offense or addressing the offender, this is going to take wisdom and self-control. And I'm going to show you why I say that. So if we go to Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17. And it reads like this. I'm going to just read it for you. If your brother or sister sins or offends or trespasses against you, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen to the church, this is my favorite part. Treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. All right. So let me paraphrase it real quick. So what's being said here in the Gospel of Matthew, right, is if someone does something against you, you go to them and you let them know what they did to you and let them know how what they did to you hurt you. Now, it is not their responsibility. Catch this. It's not their responsibility to come to you and get things right. Now, it would be ideal, but according to Matthew, they don't have to do that. But what we're supposed to do, if that person offended or transgressed or whatever against us, we're supposed to tell them what they did to us. Kind of going back to like what Sierra was saying, most people, I ain't gonna say most people, some people can do something to you, either unaware of what they've done to you, or they did it and didn't realize how much it hurt or offended you. So it is our responsibility to go and address it. And in addressing it, like I said, we need to acknowledge that that person hurt us and acknowledge how much it did hurt us. So in this process of forgiveness, after you've acknowledged that you've been hurt, after you've admit that you've been hurt, after you've assessed the damage that's happened, you got to go and you got to face it, right? Anything that you don't face is liable to destroy you. Anything that you don't go up against and put forth an effort to conquer or overcome is liable to destroy you. It's going to destroy you mentally because that person or that thing is always going to be on your mind. You're going to carry that around with you. It's going to start affecting your actual life. You ain't going to know how to interact with people. You failing on your job, all kind of stuff. You start to fail at home with family. You got to address it. You got to face it head on. You got to let the enemy know that this will not beat you. And we talked about last week about how unforgiveness can challenge your salvation. If you don't forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive you. And if your Father in heaven doesn't forgive you, like I said, your salvation hangs in the balance because you're not forgiven of your sin. If you don't address it, like I said, that thing has the power to destroy you and take over your life. So you gotta go ahead.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
So when you mean by addressing it, do you mean by addressing it with that person, or me just addressing like we're doing right now because everything works like by letting it out?
Okay, good question. So both, actually. If you're able to, and I want to stress this because I don't want anybody to go and put themselves in a dangerous or toxic situation trying to reconcile or get things right with a person. I know. But if now, ideally we want to do this first. If it's possible, we want to address it with that person.
And I'll be honest, I'm not doing it, but go ahead. I'm not doing it, but go ahead.
Okay. But
the reason why I say that not in no, like, not addressing him, because I feel like once he paid for that divorce and I got my divorce 2 years ago or the year ago, whatever, I feel like, okay, that was fine with me. That's my answer, right?
Well, that right and wrong, because what that divorce, like I said earlier, what that divorce did was it gave you what you felt like you wanted, which it might have been something that you needed, right? But it still didn't address or heal the hurt that he caused to you. The divorce covered it. It made it feel better, but it's still not healed. In addressing or facing a traumatic situation, like we talked about, I think last week, you do not have to always start the process of forgiving with that person. It's not always going to be that transactional thing.
Okay, got a question.
Go ahead.
telling you, wouldn't they come in by with fasting and praying first? Because whatever situation it is, because God already know the situation, either God will allow that person to come to you and really sincere, or God was just like, don't worry about it, just let it go. I got you. Right? By fasting and
So
praying.
so what the fasting and the prayer does is it is opening yourself up for God to pour a level of wisdom and discernment into you on how you need to approach the situation.
But if I'm fasting and praying, that's what I'm saying. If I'm fasting and praying, and I'm praying and asking God, like, okay, God, just heal me because I feel like he's gone, it's done, it's over with. Should I approach this God? And if God give me that discernment to say, no, leave it alone, then I should leave it alone. I don't have to approach it, right?
Right. You don't have to approach that person, but you still
No,
need to
I'm saying
address
that person.
Right. You don't have to approach that person, but you still need to address that thing. And forgiveness isn't always approaching or addressing the person, but forgiveness is definitely always you approaching or addressing the situation or the issue or the trauma. Does that make sense? Any questions?
I have one. From your previous Bible study, did you record it? Could somebody go back and look at it?
I didn't, and I apologize. Now we are recording this, and we're gonna try to do it from here forward. But I actually just figured out how to do that because when it comes to technology, I'm a little elderly. So yeah, that's that. But yeah, so you want to, like I said, you don't always have to address that person, but you do want to address the issue or the situation. Now, back to the text. If you do this, if addressing that person is what you need. Now, for some people, addressing the person is what you need for closure. Closure is a big part of being able to forgive people sometimes. Now, Jesus or Matthew says, right, that if you go to that person and you let them know what they did and they don't listen, and it says, you take two people along with you, and then it says to send the church. Now, taking the two people along with you and sending the church is representative of you continuing to put forth effort to get it right. So if you have put forth the effort to reconcile with this person, and that person is not willing to reconcile with you, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I've been known to be wrong a time or two, but Matthew says treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. And in Bible days, and even now, how do we treat tax collectors?
And I try to run from them.
So we avoid or we do what we need to, by paying our taxes, but it's not like I'm not going to go visit the tax collector every weekend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And so the last two, I want to get up, I want to kind of let us out here in a few minutes, but the last two, so after you have assessed the damage or the trauma and actually admitted that you've been hurt, and then you address it, either with the person or you address the situation head on, the next thing you want to do is set boundaries and stick to those boundaries. Now, after you've addressed it, and everything, at this point, you have been able to assess how hurt you're able to assess how much hurt that person or that thing caused to you. Now, from here, a part of setting the boundary is actually learning the lesson that that particular situation was supposed to have taught you. And I told you last week, when somebody does something to you, or, when they trespass against you or whatever, that is that person showing you what they are capable of doing. So from here forward, you need to set and a boundary is a limit. So you need to set limits as far as, okay, what am I going to accept for my life from here forward? What am I going to accept from people from here forward? Now, I know that, we talked earlier about not letting your trauma, make you bleed on other people, but your trauma is supposed to make you wiser. And it's a sad situation if something happens to you that is traumatic and you don't learn anything from it. And I agree. Sometimes you do get tired of being hurt by these same individuals. And in being tired of being hurt by the same individuals, like I said, you have to set boundaries. You've done this. From here forward, me and you, we can't, we don't do this. We don't hang out no more. And I'm sticking to that. You can't call my phone no more. And I'm sticking to that. You can't continue to take advantage of me. Oh, Lord. You can't continue to take advantage of me. And I keep going along with it. I'm setting boundaries. We're not doing that no more. Because if I don't set a boundary, if I don't set limits on what I'm going to accept from here forward, then what I do is I'm opening myself up to be hurt again. If you continue to open yourself up to be hurt again, that wound reopens. Now you starting back over on trying to forgive.
Okay, I got something to say on that part. I don't mean to cut you off. I know you got to go, but I just got to say this part here on what you just said. My main issue is, that's why I told you in the beginning, this is why it's hard for me to try to be in a relationship, because it's not like it was when my mom and dad was growing up. You don't have guys no more. That's why I said what I went through, it was a lesson learned. The first lesson was God will give you a warning before destruction. And I should have listened, but I didn't. The second thing is, I'm just to the point now that guys, the men folk these days, or boys, whatever you want to call them, they're not liking what my mom did was growing up. I had to tell one dude that the other day, I said, what happened to asking a girl out on a date? What asking them taking out on the movies? Every time I turn around, dude always say, let me go to your house and chill. No.
Right. And I'll say this, and this is a part of setting boundaries too, right? You will only attract what you will accept. If you accept men approaching you in a mediocre way, you will attract mediocre men.
Say that one more time from the beginning, bro. Say it one more time.
So I'll say it again. So like I said, you will attract what you accept. That's not only for TA and her man problems, but that's in our real life. People will only keep presenting the same mess to you that you accept. So what that means is we have to self-examine ourselves and figure out what signals or what what is it that we're putting off that gives people the notion that we're going to accept that kind of thing. That makes sense.
And can I add to that?
Go ahead.
Just really quickly, just to add on to that, to flip into another way. Once you start wanting more for yourself, and once you start saying like, you know what, no, I deserve a man to take me out. I deserve, God willing, for all my bills to be paid by someone else. You can get that, but you gotta fully trust and believe and actually heal before you actually start believing that for real.
Right.
But it's possible.
It is. And I think our I know our Bible study is mainly consistent of women, and I'll say this: it's good guys are few and far in between. I will attest to that, but there are some men who are looking for women just like you. There are some men who will rise to the occasion and present themselves to be and actually be the man that you need. And I'll say this: stop settling for men, relationships, friendships, whatever it might be. Stop settling for people who are below what you want for your life.
I'm sorry, I keep adding stuff. I feel like in my personal life, when I completely let go of what was, like you said, below my means, and what I felt like didn't benefit me, whether that be relationships with friends, men, whatever. When I let that go and started focusing on God and healing and bettering myself and walking in what I wanted instead of what was, that's when the good man came back out of hiding. That's when my good group of friends that lift me up came about. You can't continue to ask God for X, Y, and Z when you really, truly don't see that for yourself.
Right. That's right. And if you continue to attach yourself to people who are below where you're wanting your life to go, now there's one or two things that can happen. Either they're going to pull you down, or you're going to have to be the one to pull them up and carry all of that weight of having to pull them up and groom them to your expectation. Now, I'll say this. There's some men and some women too, right, who are willing to adapt to be the man or adapt to be the woman that you're needing. There are people who are willing to do that. But it's about how much work you're willing to put in, or like I said, what you're willing to accept. There still has to be those boundaries of, okay, now I understand that you'll try, to be what I need you to be. But there's limits, to how much I'm gonna pull. There's limits to how much weight I'm gonna carry. And that doesn't make you a weak woman or a weak man. That makes you a person with boundaries, and you're only going to accept what you can handle. I've seen women who accepted the responsibility of building a man, and they weren't built for that. And it didn't destroy the man. It destroys them. It destroys you, and vice versa. You know, if you're a man and you trying to build a woman, if it's more than you can handle, you will find yourself weak and depressed. You always angry because you're having to build somebody, and you weren't built for that. And that's a good point, Jemiah. Jemiah said, and please forgive yourself on a daily basis. A part of forgiving is forgiving yourself and forgiving your mistakes that you made, and don't live on or dwell on those mistakes. You're human. It's okay to allow yourself to be human. But like Jemiah said, learn to forgive yourself for falling short to your own expectation. All right. This is the last part, and then we're gonna leave. The last thing is move forward, move on, and acknowledge that there's still work to be done. Like I said, it's gonna be points where that old trauma is gonna be triggered again. But in moving, you move forward. You keep on moving on, but you gotta acknowledge and you gotta understand that even though I'm putting forth the effort, and even though I'm moving forward and moving on, there's still going to be work within myself that I'm going to have to do. There's going to be times where that trauma is going to come back up, and I'm going to have to go back in prayer, and I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to regroup and start back over sometimes. And I can tell y'all that because, like I said, this past weekend proved it to me, and I'm right back at the beginning, starting over, forgiving trauma from 15 years ago. So that's how we forgive. That's how we forgive. And again, remember that because you're forgiven does not mean that you're going to be fully healed at that time when you make the vow to start the forgiving process. It may take you months to heal. It may take you years to heal. But you got to put the work in and do what it is that you know that you need to do for yourself to heal from that trauma. If that's therapy, you need to go to therapy. And I don't know who this is for, but there's somebody on here who needs to be in therapy. You've been trying to carry this thing and do this thing on your own. You've been praying, and praying is good. It is. And you need to continue praying, but you need to go see somebody. You don't want your trauma to become dangerous. All right. So I'm done. Anybody got any questions, any comments?
I just want to say, y'all, don't be scared to go to therapy. Some people have a negative opinion on therapy, but I'm gonna just say I've been myself, and it does really help. So I do feel like, a lot more people should try therapy. So I'm just throw that in there.
Yeah.
And don't be like me. We go to therapy and then we don't continue to go. We go to about 3 sections and then we stop.
Right.
Definitely, I would say definitely keep trying to go because, like, for me at first, I was like, okay, this not helping me. This lady don't know me. But after a while, like, it definitely did get better. Because it does help, like, for one, talking to a stranger that doesn't know you at all versus like talking to your friends or your family, like it'll feel like you're in a judgment-free zone. So I would definitely say try it again because it did help for me a lot. And I feel like because my sister isn't here. I feel like she could agree. It did help for me a lot because I have became a better person since I did do therapy. So try it again.
I'm
Yeah.
here.
Hey girl.
But yeah, I think that was my big mistake. I was going to therapy, then I got tired of going because then I'm like, okay, this one not for me. Maybe I just need to go to another one.
And that might be it. And I'll recommend. I'll say this. So, and I'm not, you know, a racist or anything like that, but I say this. I feel like Black women should see therapists who are preferably, unless, you know, if somebody else works for you, that's fine. But Black women should see therapists that are Black women, and Black men should see Black men therapists. And I say that because there are certain things that come with being Black that they can't teach therapists in school. You gotta grow up Black to understand this stuff. So get the help that you need. And just because you're going to therapy and getting the help that you need does not make you less than, it doesn't make you weak or anything like that. It makes you wise. And if you're trying to heal and move forward, you need to see somebody. I guess I don't know who it is, but you need to see somebody. But if nobody has anything else, does anybody have anything else?
No, but thank you. And thank you, Jemai, for the invite. Took me a while to get up here because I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned it. But thank y'all.
Right.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're gonna pray and we're gonna go. Well, y'all already home. I said that last week. We're gonna pray and dismiss. Father God, in the name of Jesus, Lord, we thank you for another Bible study. Lord, we thank you for the clarity and the understanding that we got tonight. Lord, we ask you to use what we've learned and help us to move forward in our lives and in our walks. God, we ask you to allow this information to bring us closer to you. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I'll catch y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Why she had to say it just like me?
Okay, get off.